Hello YouTube world, this is Logic Crazy and I'm Jonathan, and here's yet another tutorial on creating your n-queens solver. In this tutorial we're going to focus right in on creating multiple threads. Right now these multiple threads might not be of a ton of use, but you will see their power later on, especially in more complicated programs. Basically the idea of multi-threading is to do two things at once. It's equivalent of multitasking. So computers are great at this. They have the operating system, and then I'm running NetBeans on here. I also have can open a browser and other things, and so you're multitasking. Each one could be considered under a different thread or multiple threads. So that's what we call this. So this program will have multiple threads or strands, but they're all the same program basically. So one thread will be focused on graphics, and the other one will be just focused on solving a chess engine or solving the n-queens problem or anything else that you have that you want the engine to do. So basically we're gonna start out with this outline. Don't bother quickly writing down each one of these things. Feel free to download in the description below these two classes and create an n-queens tutorial project in NetBeans or Eclipse or whatever you use, and import these two classes. User interface as the main class and timer draw as the secondary class. Just a reminder that these download links are below each and every one of my tutorials to download the class, so you don't have to write it all out. If you don't want to, you can just download and start from wherever that tutorial is. Alright, so here is how we're going to go about this. You'll see just to look at the basics, I have created a basic frame. In the main method we call count. Count just has an infinite loop, while true is an infinite loop, and it just does counter plus plus, and counter is a static global variable. And then the drawing event here, the paint component, it just draws this string counter on the board. So if I were to run it right now, you would see this exact thing. So it had already gone through a few loops before the draw paint component method came into effect, but that it just draws a number. If I wanted to repaint it continuously, I could right after here say Java F dot repaint, like so, and then run it. Now obviously it would run through numbers slower because it's always updating the screen, but there you can see it just zooming through all sorts of numbers, constantly updating. But we want to do this on a separate thread. So basically we have timer draw, but timer draw is just a regular class right now. We want to create it as a thread class. So the way we do that is we say it implements runnable. And runnable has two N's, in case you're wondering. These spellings do matter. Then we need to have a regular class has this method called a main method. That would be the main class of your whole program. So the computer starts off with this main method, and you can't change the spelling of main. Same with a thread, but its name is called run. So we would have to create a public, and this time it would be a void run. Just like that. There we go. So this will run the very first thing in this thread. Now what we'll do is, in this run, let's say we want to update the screen every second. So what we'll do is say while true, this is again an infinite loop, and we'll say user interface dot java f dot repaint, and then we will have a try catch thing. Now try catch, basically what they do is they're for error handling, so that instead of finding an error and quitting the program, it deals with it properly as we want it to. So we'll say in here thread dot sleep, and in milliseconds we'll put in 1000. That's the equivalent of 1 second. So I'll repaint, it'll wait a second, repaint, wait a second, repaint, except unlike the way when I say just wait a second, this is an actual second. So slight difference there. Also add the @override thing on the run. That is a good idea to do. And now coming back to this user interface, if we ran it, nothing would change because user interface hasn't created a separate thread, nor has it started that thread. So the way we first create a thread, we have to tell it that this is a thread. So, and we have to name this thread. Timer draw is not good enough just yet. Right now I would assume that's a regular class if I just called timer draw. So what I will do is say thread timer thread is what we'll call it, equals new thread new timer draw. Just like that. That creates the new thread. Now just a side note, although we have now told it that this timer thread is the timer draw class as a separate process that it can run side by side with other threads, you can just call other methods in here and it will treat it as not a separate thread. So when a regular class would just call a separate class method, it would be considered on the same thread, the same process. It's a linear instead of two things doing something simultaneously. So we've created this thread, and now we have to start it. So we say, we now call it by its name, timer thread dot, and you guessed it, start. So now when I run this, you'll notice it should, if we did everything right, yes, update every second. Look at that. Alright, working exactly as it should. So this is the method. Just to explain what I was talking about before, about treating this as a thread class and as a regular class. If I created public static void TTT, this is obviously just a random method here, and I said user interface ++. Oh, user interface dot counter. I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. And so this, instead of saying counter ++, called in timer draw dot TTT. If I were to run this, I believe we would get the same results, because it's just calling this as a regular method in the same thread, but in a separate thread. It's a separate process, multiprocessing. So I hope that that has made some sense to you, and that you can use this as a basis, as a template for anything that you're making, not only this nQueens tutorial, but pretty much everything. Because the problem is, when you have a computer that's thinking intensely on one task, the graphics in the meantime may be frozen up, and so it's a great idea to have the graphics at least running on a separate process so that the user doesn't think your program has frozen and yet you're a terrible programmer, but instead has a nice smooth experience running whatever you have created. Alright, until next time, enjoy Java.